Welcome, my darlings. Make yourself comfortable, and I have a tale to tell you. If you enjoy it, please be sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and leave me a comment. I always enjoy your comments. Now, let us begin. Thalassaphobia by Taylor Redmond. Sophia darted her head in all directions to try and find someone who could help her. However, there was nobody in sight, only deep blue water as far as the eye could see. The sky above her was a clear, bright blue, but there was no sign of the sun anywhere. Looking down, she could barely see into the water at all. It wasn't dirty, just dark. In fact, the water was cleaner than any ocean water she'd ever seen. Pulling some water into her hands, she could detect no sign of grit or brine whatsoever, even though she was almost certain this was an ocean. Perhaps even more disturbingly, there was no sound or waves to be sensed. There wasn't even the sound of water splashing as she moved about. She tried swimming, and even though she could move, she couldn't get a clear sense of what direction she was going in, or if she was moving at all. That was when she felt something touch the bottom of her foot. It was so fast and brief that she didn't have time to discern what it felt like, but she felt it. She almost rocketed out of the water in terror. She couldn't even see her legs, the water was so dark. She splashed about, trying to swim as fast and as far away as she could. Though she couldn't feel it on her skin, she could still feel its presence, swimming underneath her. She screamed out, getting the water in her mouth as she splashed. To her surprise, it didn't taste like salt water, nor did it taste like water, for that matter, either. It was just simply wet. Then, to her surprise, she saw something on the horizon. It looked to be a small island. The sight of it confused her. It dominated the horizon line as if she were only a couple of hundred of meters away. But it couldn't be this close now. There was no sign of it when she looked around only a couple of seconds ago. There were no clouds or waves it could have been hidden behind either. She had no time to think it over. She felt something brush up against her foot again. This time she could tell what it was, or at least what it felt like. It felt like human skin. It made no sense to her, but she didn't plan on sticking around long enough to find out. She hurriedly paddled her way over to the island, kicking her feet frantically. As she got closer to the island, she could hear sounds. However, they weren't sounds that she would expect to hear in this environment. They weren't waves or sea life, but rather spoken words. They sounded dim and muffled, and she couldn't make out what they were saying. Also, the words sounded like they were right in her ear, even though there was no one around. Eventually, she could make out the words that were being said, but they made no sense. "Do you think she's doing okay? Here, Jesse, Tyler, help me get her off the floor and onto the desk at least. How do you feel, Alexandrina?" "Not really feel her, but for some reason I can't stop thinking about her. This whole thing is stupid. How the freak are we going to drive them out of the city with these useless powers?" The entire conversation from multiple voices she was sure she recognized continued to play on as she swam to the island. It was as if she were in the room with them, but there was no sign of anyone on the water, nor anybody on the coast of the island. She was about to call out to the island to make sure when she felt her body rise in the water on the crest of a wave. Only it wasn't a wave. Something large had burst out of the surface of the water. What it was, she wouldn't dare look behind her. Her gaze was instead transfixed on its shadow. The shadow was long and continued to extend. It not only engulfed Sophia, but also the entire island, and continued to extend past the island endlessly. She clenched her eyes shut, preparing for some impact, but there was nothing. The shadow was still there, but the water was unnaturally calm again. She turned around in the water and opened her eyes. It was an arm, a human arm. The skin on the arm was dark, smooth, and looked to be female. Even though she had been caught on the wave as it had burst through the surface, it was on the horizon line, looking to be hundreds of meters away from her. The hand was open-palmed with fingers outstretched, as if reaching for something in the sky. "Hey, I think I can feel her, guys." The arm suddenly started to fall down on Sophia's direction. As it fell, it seemed to extend towards her, lengthening the arm beyond normal proportions. Where at first it looked like it wouldn't fall anywhere near her, now it looked like it was coming down right on top of her. She screamed in abject terror and shut her eyes again as it came crushing down on top of her. She put her body into the fetal position as it went rocketing down into the depths. She had the sensation of being pulled and pushed around violently as if in a riptide. All she could do was to duck her head into her knees and try and brace for impact. She felt her body hurtle down into the depths, not knowing when she would hit the ocean floor. Strangely, she couldn't feel any water resistance as she fell. It felt as if she was falling through air. Finally, her body hit the floor of the ocean. She stayed in the fetal position, anticipating another impact. However, there was none. She lifted her head only to see darkness all around her. There was faint light illuminating her body, as if it were emanating from it. However, the faint glow only emanated a couple of inches in front of her. She uncurled her body and turned around in every direction, scanning for any sign of life. It was that this time she realized she wasn't choking in the water. It wasn't that she could breathe underwater, she simply didn't need to breathe. Strangely, she felt that the ground beneath her feet was soft. Looking down, she saw the ocean floor didn't resemble any ocean floor she'd ever seen. It wasn't made of sand or silt like one would expect. Instead, it looked to be made of a mass that sank under weight. Upon closer inspection, she saw veins crossing across the floor, like it was made of flesh. Transfixed by the sight, she bent down and placed her hand on the surface. The moment she did, she felt the ground writhe beneath her. At the same time, the ground started to illuminate in a faint white glow in all directions. The glow and activity remained even as she released her hand. That was when she felt the presence again behind her. It was impossibly large, and she could sense its presence, even though she couldn't see it. She was nothing but an ant to whatever it was. In terror, she swam in the opposite direction from it. Her body propelled itself faster than any human could swim. But it didn't feel like it was enough. The presence was still there. She looked behind her for any trace of what was after her. Her body collided with a wall. It wasn't made out of rock, but again, felt like it was made of flesh. Not even bothering to look at what it was, she sped off in another direction. However, she collided with the fleshy wall again, only after a couple of seconds. Over and over again, she sped off in different directions, only to be met by the same wall. To her horror, the distance between the walls was shrinking, as if they were closing in on her. It was then that she finally took a look at the wall, illuminated by her faint glow. The wall was ridged with deep wrinkles crisscrossed all along it. Fingerprints, she thought, as she realized she was trapped between cupped hands. Suddenly her body was swept off the ground in a current as a gigantic hands completed the trap and cupped her against their palms. As she settled down, she was now resting on the hands. Before she could escape, they rose upwards with such force she was pressed against the palms by force. The glow that had been emitting from the ground disappeared as she rocketed upward, leaving her in complete darkness again. Then, just as she started moving, she came to a halt. The cupped palms opened up, but no light was present. Still, with her glow being the only source of light, she felt the presence was right in front of her. Then she felt it start to get closer, now that the hands brought her up to its level. Whatever this thing was now bringing its head down to its hands. The first thing she saw in her glow was a dark hemisphere lower down, as if in a reaver's sunrise. The chin, she thought to herself. It continued to fall, revealing a large crevice that slashed across in either direction for what looked like meters. The mouth. Each end of the mouth was curved upwards. Whatever it was happy to have caught her. The mouth passed out of view below the palms as she was almost struck by a fleshy outcropping that brushed against the palm she was resting on. This was the nose. She dreaded what she knew was coming next. The fleshy outcropping gave way to reveal a pit. She knew that this was the socket, but she couldn't see the eye yet. As it bent closer, she was flung back by a wave of water pressure as it blinked. As the water cleared, she looked up and was shocked to see herself. After a couple of seconds, she realized she was looking at her reflection. Backing up, she knew that its eye was looking at her. She felt a sense of vulnerability, as if she could see within her. That was when she felt the ground tilt under her. She was flung to the ground as the palms were tilting upwards towards the pupil of the eye. She tried to swim out of the way, but she could no longer move. The pupil was expanding as she slid closer to it. In desperation, she tried to cling to the ground, but there was nothing to grip onto. There was a split second as the palms lifted to their zenith, and then she fell into the abyss of its eye. So quoth this raven. A very big thank you to Taylor Redmond, a new author on Reddit. I have posted below his Reddit ID and his ID for Wattpad. So if you could go and read his stories there, he would be most happy. And thank you to him for some wonderful stories that are coming up. Anyway, happy Halloween, everyone. A lovely, glorious Samhain to those who practice. And I will catch you next time, my darlings.